As we gather virtually today from all across the Ottawa region, we acknowledge that we are located on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Algonquin people. We recognize the long-standing relationship with this land, which remains unceded. Good morning, everyone. My name is Martin.
And I'm Rachelle, and we are students in grade 12 and 11 at Notre Dame Catholic High School. And we are very excited today to be here with Miss Ferguson's phys ed class, as well as everyone viewing the broadcast over our live stream to interview Youth Sports Coach of the Year, Kwesi Loney. Welcome, Kwesi. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before we begin, please note that at any time, viewers may send us questions for our guests using the Q&A function, or for our live streamers, the link to a Google form showing on the screen, and we will do our very best to ask as many as we can.
Also a reminder that this meeting is being recorded for the future publication to the NCSSAA YouTube channel.
Kwesi, if you would like to please tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, my name is Kwesi Loney. I'm the head coach of soccer operations at Carleton University. I've been in that position now for the past 4 years, but I've been coaching at Carleton University for the past 11 years as an assistant coach as well.
Given that you played soccer in high school for the Carleton Ravens varsity soccer team, tell us about the difference between being an athlete in high school and versus post-secondary.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I mean, where I grew up in high school, I went to high school in Toronto, in Scarborough, and I ended up coming to Carleton University to do my degree. But the difference at that time for me was vast, and I think it's still quite a big difference now between high school sport versus university sport. One of the things I always mention to future athletes, whether it be soccer or any sport in general, is just be prepared to be busy, right? I mean, I think one of the major differences, when you move into the university student athlete realm, is that all your time is dedicated to sport and school. I mean, the social element still exists, but your social circle now consists of your teammates for the most part, particularly when you're in season. But I think playing for your high school is special. I think school pride is always a very important element of the high school experience. But from a sporting perspective, there's no comparison. I mean, the resources that we have at the university level, I mean, right now I have a coaching staff of 8 coaches. We have a support team of athletic therapists, sports med doctors, strength and conditioning coaches. So just the amount of care and specific support that we provide to the athletes, just vastly different than that of high school. That being said, I do still feel there's a lot of I always encourage kids to continue playing at the high school level. There's nothing better than representing your school, and I feel like sometimes that particularly in the club realm, they particularly on the soccer side, I've been hearing a lot about is that asking players not to compete at the high school level. Just because of the club demands. A lot of the local clubs now are playing a lot more, demanding a lot more of their athletes, and sometimes they feel like the high school game conflicts. But I tend to disagree. I think the more you're playing, the better. I think playing in high school, as I mentioned before, is a special opportunity if you have that chance to play. And I also like to think that moving forward, it might be something that we should be looking at where some of the local sporting organizations, whether it be for soccer or basketball or hockey, should try to work a little bit more alongside with the high schools. Obviously, I know for the most part, high school coaches are volunteer based on top of their daily requirement of maintaining the students in the classroom. So sometimes it's just a matter of time. But sport in high school is extremely important, and perhaps we can look at it from a perspective where we start to bring in more of the surrounding clubs and sporting organizations to support high school sports. I think it's a wonderful time in your life as an athlete, as a student. But in terms of comparison, high school to university, definitely vastly different. And if I can, just one point I want to make on that is one of my recruiting conversations I always have is with regards to young high school students who are coming into university. I always try to suggest to them, look, really just focus on school and pushing your sport as much as possible. Because once you get to university, the experience that you're gonna be a part of is incredible, right? And you don't want to miss out on that, because you may have not focused as much on your sport in high school, or not have maybe pushed your academics as much as you possibly could have. I mean, to be very honest with you, I mean, when you're in high school, you have the opportunity to attend any university you want to, right? Not just here in Canada, but obviously across the US. And I think sport is an incredible vehicle to get you there. So if you could start to think about that, when you come in as a grade 9 student or grade 10, or, or your subsequent years in high school, and you really, dedicate yourself to being the best you can in your sport, as well as in the classroom, I mean, the opportunities for universities you want to attend, it just increases, the number of schools that will be more accepting of you, because, your academics are good, you're a good athlete. But then you can go anywhere you want, right? I mean, like I said, I grew up in Toronto, and I wanted to live in Ottawa. I wanted to go to school in Ottawa, and my academics and my ability in my sport allowed me to go to Carleton University. And those 5 years for me were some of the best of my life. So I like to always encourage young student athletes in high school to really focus on the school part and the sporting aspect of it, because it does open a lot more doors than you think, particularly when you're trying to get into a university, when you graduate, right? But definitely difference. So put the effort in now so you can enjoy the fruits of your labor when you get to university.
That was amazing. Now, before we move on, NCSSAA has a short video highlighting you, Kwesi. So let's watch. Congratulations on the award, Kwesi.
Thanks. I mean, it was a great accomplishment, and it's a great acknowledgement. And I always look at that specific award as a tip of the hat to my team, right? The players and what they've been able to do, because obviously you don't get to see what I do day in and day out, but you see the end result with my players. So I always commend my players when I win an award such as that, because I think it's more of a representation of how they've been able to interpret our philosophies and style of play and bring it to life on the field. So I always, give that award to my athletes.
Of course, soccer is a big thing of teamwork and all working together with the coach and players together. So as a coach, what do you look for in a player when you're recruiting, and what sets an athlete apart?
Oh, I think that's an excellent question. I mean, I get that question quite often from recruits looking to come into our program, and I think what's become a little bit of the norm now, when you look at things like work ethic and talent and ability. I mean, to me, if those are things that we're always looking at right off the bat, and that to me is more of an automatic. If you don't have the work ethic, I mean, I think you're not going to be cut out for university sport. Right. So I think that's just something that you need to have and develop at a younger age, and make sure you carry that through your career. But things for me, I specifically look for that I think maybe a little bit more unique to our program, is I look for individuals, that are versatile in terms of their ability to play. Obviously in any sport, soccer, being one of them, we have multiple positions within the game. And I always look for players that can play, more than a singular position. I think it lends itself to more of an understanding of the game. It lends itself to more of, the game is very fluid. So as you move in and out of your position, if you end up in a position on the field where, that's kind of out of your norm, if you're a versatile individual, you have a better understanding of it. You'll be able to still perform at the highest level in that position to those rotations. So, and for me personally, it also lends itself to our style of play. I mean, we're very fluid in our movement and rotations. And for me, if I have a player that can, is comfortable in playing both defense out wide, or as a forward, it's definitely beneficial to how we want to play in our style. Another area for me, something I look at in a player is the accountability. I'm very big on players taking responsibility, taking ownership, for their actions and their words, right? And I think that's a big component for me as we create our environment and our culture. So accountability is always one for me as a characteristic of an individual we want to bring into our program. Another one for me as well is solutions or ideas driven. Obviously, the way we look at the sport, and I think a lot of people should look at a sport is it's always a problem you're trying to solve. Right? Like in our game, we're always trying to solve the opposition, right? Whether it be, we need to score a goal, how many passes do we need to put together to score that goal, or we need to defend, how many numbers do we want around the ball, to create a numerical advantage that makes our defending easier. So I like to look at players that, in the run of a game or a training session, always looking for solutions, always looking for ways to solve the problem as opposed to create the problem. Right. I can see the problem myself. I get it. Right. But I mean, you want individuals that don't kind of stall on what the issue is, but immediately start working towards how to solve it. And then lastly for me is personality. I'm very big on the individual characteristic, coming in, with that, a little bit of yourself, right? Whether it be, how your upbringing or where you grew up in high school or your town. I mean, everybody's very unique in that respect. And, I require certain things of a team, how we play in terms of how you pass the ball and how you do certain things. But I think it's your personality that adds that little bit of a twist on it that makes it unique and special to you. And only you could do it in that certain way. Right. So I always look at, those particular traits. But in terms of, for me, what sets the athlete apart, it's definitely that personality. I mean, for me, it's what I look for, right? I mean, I'm sure we've been in interviews and discussions with our fellow classmates or teachers, and or you've seen interviews of some of your favorite sports fans, and the ones that you follow are the ones that are the most colorful and the ones that have the most personable responses, right? Not the gray or the canned answers, right? So I'm always looking for the individual that's willing to, just give a little bit more of themselves, be a little more open, share more about them and have themselves come across every aspect of our game and how they play. So definitely for me, it's the individual's personality for sure.
Absolutely. A lot of things as players that we should look for, but also as coaches. And in your playing career, did you have a particular coach that had a big impact on you?
Good. That's a very good question. I mean, I look at, my different stages, as a coach. I mean, obviously I never started off as like a 10-year-old saying, oh, I want to coach in my life. Right. I mean, I had a lot of influential coaches. I mean, the first one I can remember for me was a gentleman by the name of Martin and Bill Alt. And I met them in my first year of university when I first moved to Ottawa. And I was playing in my first year of university and around the city, and these two guys were involved with a coaching service called Curver Coaching. It was kind of like a soccer camp, but it was like remote. So they would travel across Ontario, parts of the U.S., parts of Quebec, and deliver these very specific type of coaching techniques. Anyhow, I mean, we crossed paths one day on a field, and they said, hey, you know what? I think that you'd be really good at this. Why don't you jump on board with us in the summer? So for me, I was a young guy. I was, still very active. I was playing, and, it was an easy transition for me to get into, coaching because I'd been playing. So that was my real first stint in coaching, and I loved it. I mean, the philosophy, I loved what coaching enabled me to do. Just how I was engaging with younger kids, really allowing me to share my passion and my joy of the game with such a younger age group. And then obviously the travel. I mean, it was fun. I mean, I coached in St. Lawrence, just across the border. Went to Toronto quite often, so it was great. It was able to go back home for a bit. But and now I was in a coach's capacity, so it was, very different. So that's how I got started, in terms of my love for the game and love from the coaching side of things. And then for me, my university coach, Sandy Mackey, definitely changed my outlook on the game and what the game can do for an individual, not just from a sporting perspective, but just from a life perspective. He really opened my eyes in terms of not just the physical elements of the game or the tactical elements of the game, but the human side of the game, right? Which is, understanding the individual, understanding, that everybody's personality and characteristics are different, right? He definitely taught me how to understand how to manage the different personalities and to get the best out of people. So I always appreciated my time with him, both as a player and I had the opportunity to work with him as an assistant coach in my later years. But I mean, for me, those are the two. I look at them as kind of bookends. Bill Alton, Martin kind of started me off, and Sandy, kind of gave me my ending here, where it's kind of set me on my path now to be with Carleton University in the capacity that I'm in right now.
So we just got a question from James in the Virtual Academy.
Hmm?
Who is your favorite player of all time and why?
Wow. Wow. Such a good question. I mean, I have to definitely say Thierry Henry. He plays for Arsenal, which is, my favorite club that I follow. But for me, it was just the way he approached the game. I mean, I'm a defender by trade and he's a striker. So our positions were definitely not the same, but it was just the manner in which he embodied the game in terms of how he carried his team. He was the leader, he was the captain, and he did it not just through words, but he did it through actions. The goals that he would score in the key moments of games and how he would uplift his team. I mean, that was always the kind of impact I wanted to have, as a player. And he did it in a manner of being able to score goals, and I was a defender, so I found ways to translate it into my particular position. And even now, I still follow him now. Still a big fan of just him in general. I mean, he's also now transitioned into the coaching realm. I mean, most recently he was actually just a coach in Montreal with Montreal Impact. So it was just great to see how he's made that transition as a world star from on the field to now. More on the management side and coaching, right? And it's just kind of great to see how players can make that transition. It's not always a successful transition. I think not necessarily the best players always make the best coaches. So I think it's important to see, which type of characteristic traits are transferable into this realm. Yeah, but definitely Thierry Henry and yes, my favorite club is Arsenal.
That's awesome that you've had such great role models, whether it be coaches or players growing up. Now that we are in a pandemic, how has COVID affected your daily life and work life, and how are things different for you?
Wow, I mean, my average day, when we were in season, I would see my players and coach my players every day, right? And that would be from August all the way through until March, right? And that interaction that I have with my players is no longer. So for me, it's been an enormous change in my life in terms of, I've kind of had to redefine how I coach and how I engage with my players. And I'm not, to be honest with you, I mean, I definitely struggled with it in the earlier days. Back in, I guess in March, when the pandemic first broke out. Because like everybody else, you're thinking in the back of your mind, okay, this is only going to be 3 months. This is only going to be 2 months, and we'll be back. And then you see it, how it's just been extending. So, I just had to come to terms with this is what my new kind of role will have to be, and how am I going to engage with my players. So like you've done as well. I mean, obviously online has played a big role. I started doing training sessions online with my players. We started introducing different like speaker series where we bring in different people from different walks of the game to speak to the players. So what I found it has done is it's expanded my range in terms of how to better support my athletes, how to engage with them when not just having to be on the field. So I am hoping that I can maintain a lot of these new skill sets and different areas to improve a player and bring it into when we do get back onto the field. But yeah, it's definitely been a challenging time. I think no different for anybody else. But what I've found in this moment is the level of conversations I now have with my players, right? I mean, you're engaging a lot, over phone calls, over Zoom meetings such as this one, and you really get to learn a lot more about your player, right? Because now you don't have the sport, like you're not training, you're not in competition, so the focus now more becomes upon aspirations, and more on the mental preparation for games and training and how you're approaching different elements of the game. And we're able to dive a lot more into the tactics of the game, so you got a lot more cerebral in terms of how we approach the game. So I'm very, very thankful that I had this opportunity to kind of not redefine myself, but expose myself to a different means of how to engage my players, right? And what I've also found in this time, which was, for me, it's been a very proud moment for me as a coach, is, I have my players checking in on me, right? Which is, as a coach, we all know that we give and we give and we give and we give, and sometimes it's a thankless job, but that's not what we do it, right? But just for, these moments where I have a player just calls me out of the blue, coach, yeah, how are you doing today? How's family? How are your kids? And just to see that, right, means the job that we are doing is working, and you're seeing the fruits of it, because now your players are not just seeing you as just a coach, but they're seeing you as a human, as a father, as a husband, as somebody that's suffering or going through the same challenges like everybody else. But so it was great for me to kind of, it was a great moment to have some of my players just out of the blue just want to chat, talk about whatever. And so I think from that perspective, just the relationship between myself and my athletes has improved. And I think, a lot of coaches are probably seeing the same thing, where their relationship with their student athletes has changed and has evolved during this time.
I know the pandemic has definitely been challenging for everyone, but it's fantastic to see how you're growing from this and continuing working. I will now pass it to Martin to ask a few questions.
So just going back to your earlier days, could you just tell us about how you grew up and how that's led to how you've become a coach now?
Yeah, I mean, my journey is kind of a bit of a roundabout kind of way. As I mentioned earlier on, I mean, when I was much younger, I mean, I never saw myself in the role that I'm in right now. I grew up in Toronto. I went to high school in Scarborough. And for me, Carleton University was a place I wanted to go. I mean, I wanted to study political science, and being in the nation's capital, it made the most sense. But I never came to Carleton necessarily for soccer. For me, it was just I wanted to focus on academics, and soccer was just something I wanted to just keep going, because I played it my entire life. So yeah, so I came to Carleton, and my experience at the university was incredible. I just learned so much about myself, learned so much about what I wanted to be, and the, kind of the person I wanted to be, not the kind of, where I wanted to work, but more or less the person I wanted to be and the influence I wanted to have. So when I graduated from university, I actually was able to secure a job with UNICEF. So I worked with UNICEF for 8 years. And to be honest with you, I mean, I never, working in the government wasn't something that I was really looking forward or looking at. So, working with an NGO such as UNICEF was fantastic. At such a young age, I had been exposed to so much. I mean, you may not remember this because your generation is much younger, but your teachers and parents will. UNICEF transitioned from every Halloween, we used to have like a small box, it used to go door to door. And people used to put coins in your boxes, and that was one of the biggest charitable activities that used to take place not within Canada. And so I was a part of that phase out. It wasn't my decision, but I was definitely a part of the phase out plan, when I was with UNICEF. So, that taught me a lot just in terms of, managing transitions and things like that. But from there, I wanted a bit of a change. I felt that I was getting a little comfortable in my position, and, I was still fairly young, and there's still a lot more I wanted to do. And so I did a complete change in my career, and I went into software sales with an American-based company. That was a different experience for me. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you it was the best experience. I learned another valuable trait, which I think I think everybody needs to have that skill set in their back pocket. I think it's always something very useful in life. So I picked that up from that position. And after that, I was there for 2 years, and I enjoyed it, but I knew that wasn't for me. So, without having another position, I kind of stopped working there, and took a bit of a break and tried to figure out what my next step was and where I wanted to go. Now, keep in mind, while I was working with UNICEF and transitioning, I was always coaching, right? I was always coaching on the side on a part-time, with youth teams, age. My first team that I coached was a U11 team. Like, my first official team was a U11 boys team with the Ottawa Royals, a local club here. And I fell in love with it. I mean, like I mentioned before, I was with Curver Coaching, but that was more like a summer camp type basis. But now this is my first real stint as a head coach, with a youth team, and it was fun. 7v7 soccer, and the oranges at halftime, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And then that kind of spurred me on. So I went from Ottawa Royals to then the Ottawa Fury. And I spent a good chunk of my coaching career there, working with kids from the age of U12 all the way up to our women's semi-professional team. So while I was still working my 9 to 5, I was still coaching on the side, and what was very evident, or starting to become very evident, was that trying to balance the two and do the two at a high level was proving to be very difficult. Because I want, like, the kind of person I am, I give myself to everything I'm in. So I was working at the time with Umbro, which is a sporting brand. And, this was an opportunity for me to, give a little more flexibility to my schedule, allowed me to focus a little more on my coaching. But it was great because Umbro is synonymous with soccer. So it was kind of hand in hand. It worked out really well. But at this point, I really started pushing on the coaching side. At this point, I started working with Algonquin College. So I was there for 2 years as a head coach. And, while I was with Algonquin, I was, still working, my regular job as well. And I started to see there were opportunities that started to come up, across the country where, coaches were taken on a full-time basis in a soccer capacity. And, I started to look at, well, how could I achieve that? And I love the city of Ottawa. I mean, I love living here. I love the community. So it wasn't somewhere I wanted to leave. So I started to explore what could be done here in that realm. And I remember after my second year at Algonquin, I got contacted by Sandy Mackey at Carleton University, and he asked if I wanted to join their staff. And I was like, yeah, I jumped at the opportunity. I mean, it was full circle for me, being a player, at the university, obviously an alumni, and then being able to come back and be a part of, the soccer program was incredible. So yeah, absolutely. And, I spent, 6 years as the assistant coach. And, during that time, I mean, Sandy and I always were talking about, what it would look like if there was a full-time position, or what it would be, how we would structure it, and, what would be the benefits of it. And, and I'm always very grateful to Carleton University, because the full-time position never existed. So it wasn't until, Sandy was about to retire that the consideration for the role to be transferred into a full-time role came about. And, we created the position, we pitched the idea to, our department, and, they're fully supportive. And that's kind of how I ended up, where I am now. I mean, don't get me wrong, like during that time, I also owned a soccer shop, but, I did a bit of retail business as well. And, I think throughout my career, both my time at university, my 9 to 5s that I was able to maintain, right into coaching. I think each position I held shaped me into the person I am now, enabling me to do the job that I'm doing now. Like I mentioned before, I mean, I think sales is very important, and part of my job is a bit of selling. I mean, I'm a bit of a recruiter. I have to recruit, and I have to sell my university. I have to sell our academic programs. I have to sell our facilities. And the other part of it, I owned a business for a short stint as well, but that had me managing staff, managing budgets, and right now I do the same thing, in my current position. So everything kind of shaped up and led me to where I am now. I like to think that a lot of my success that I've had in a short period of time has been because of the roles that I've held. I've been fortunate to hold over my career. So a little bit of a longer story there, but I definitely wanted to indicate how you never know where you're going to end up, right? Like I said, I never expected to be in my role. Furthest thing from my mind, to be honest with you. But it was interesting that everything that I had done in my life to this point has kind of led me to this job. So always be conscious of that. Never look at a job and say, well, it's not in line with where I want to be. I mean, you never know what skill sets may be required of you in your position.
So in the past few years, we have definitely seen many changes and events, but in your perspective, how has being a person of color affected your athletic and professional career? And have you seen much improvement or progress?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a major topic currently in our society right now. Um, for me personally, from an athletic perspective, has it ever prevented me from achieving anything that I've wanted to achieve, sporting wise? No, I don't potentially believe so in terms of my specific experiences. But I can say I've definitely experienced, racism in sport, growing up. I remember, being a young player and, really getting really exposed to it the first time was just being verbally abused by a parent of the opposition, right? And I'm talking about when I'm 12 years old and not really understanding why, because where I grew up in my community, my high school, my particular high school was probably 90% black, and then the teams and the soccer clubs I played on were mainly structured around the West Indian community. So had a lot of families from Jamaica, Trinidad, St. Vincent, Guyana. So a lot of my youth teams were all constructed from that manner. So when we would travel as a team, to the US or different obscure parts of Ontario or parts of Canada, yeah, I was exposed to some abuse, verbal abuse from parents, definitely players from the oppositions, and at first it was tough, for me as a young player trying to understand it, right? And I remember going home and being very emotional with my parents and being like, this guy called me this and this parent called me that, and why, I just couldn't understand. And when that first started for me, my reactions wasn't the greatest, right? It was fight. I would lash out. I would, fight or let it impact me in terms of the field. And what my dad, used to tell me was that, I mean, son, you play a contact sport, right? I mean, and sport is the greatest equalizer. So we would go in these games and yeah, we would, me and my teammates would get verbally abused at times, but then we would score, right? And we would repeatedly score goals, or like I mentioned, I grew up playing as a defender, so I was just a physical person. So when I had the opportunity to make my mark, I would, right? So I learned a lot how to handle it and how to try to manage it and not let it impact my progression as a player. But yeah, I mean, like I said, my first experience was probably when I was 12, and then as I went on in my career, yeah, I experienced it, of course. I mean, I remember one particular moment, and again, I think it all comes down to interpretation and how you perceive it and whatnot. But for me, I remember I was selected, to the Canadian FISU games team. So in university, they have like a university Olympics, right? So it's set up the same way as you envision an Olympics, just university athletes. So I was selected to represent Canada, on our men's and on the soccer team, and we traveled to South Korea. So this was in my last year of university, and it was an incredible experience. I mean, you're around, all different countries, sports, athletes. It was amazing, an incredible moment for me in my career, but definitely one of the most memorable. And I remember our first game, and we were playing China in our first game, and great match, a lot of nerves, everybody's nervous, and obviously I got the opportunity. I started the game and I played full 90 minutes. And at the end of the game, right, they had they do, at that level or at the university level, they do random drug tests, right, for banned substances and whatnot. And so at the end of the game, the way it works is, they come and get you directly from the field, right? So as soon as the whistle blows, the medical team, it's like 4 or 5 people like come out right onto the field and kind of take you off the field. So we won the game, right? It was won the game 1-0, which is a major upset. And I remember the delegation, coming onto the field and just coming directly for me. And you have to understand that I'm on a team where I was the only person of color on the team, and I'm playing against China. So I'm the only person of color on the team specifically, and I am the one that is selected for this random test. It is what it is, and so I look at those moments like that, and it just obviously everything was fun because I was serious about my sports, and so there was no issues there. But it was just the fact that in that moment where I was looking forward to just celebrating and being with my team, that I'm the one that's selected in that moment, right? But that's just some of the things that I've experienced. I would definitely say, from an athletic perspective, it hasn't prevented me from achieving what I've wanted to achieve. I've had a lot of friends that's not the case for them. I definitely can say that some of my experiences are, definitely been more on the personal side, on the more relationship side. Some of my engagements with teachers when I was in high school, definitely had some experiences there. As a coach, it hasn't prevented me, but in my career, as I was progressing as a coach, there wasn't many coaches of color that I could look up to, whether it be on the professional side, watching, professional leagues around the world, or whether it's just here, in our country. I had some great mentors in my life, but for me, in terms of, looking up to coaches that resembled me or from my culture, that didn't really exist, right? So what I always found was that, whenever I was in a coach's position, I always felt like, I couldn't make a mistake. I was, I really had to make sure that I did this to the best of my ability. There were no issues. And I think that's part of the reason why I've been able to achieve what I've achieved to date, is because I always felt like I had to be better all the time. I always had to be the best, and even now I feel like, I have to be a certain way or have a certain level of success in order to show the younger generation that, yeah, I mean, you can be a coach, as a person of color and have success and have the opportunities. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's prevented me, but I can definitely say it's something I've been conscious of. And I take that with me, every time I'm on the field, how I'm perceived, how I'm, how I execute, how I deliver my programs, how my players perceive me, right? So I'm always conscious of that. Now, the second part of your question was, have I seen much improvement or progress? And I think that's a great question. I mean, a little story I'll share is that I remember, when at the height of the current social unrest, when it transpired back in June, I remember I had all these feelings and all these emotions, and you start thinking about, well, my experiences and what I've felt in my life. And I remember getting on a phone call with my dad and just being, Dad, well, this is what's going on, and this is how I'm feeling. And he didn't say a word. And I think I went on for like 2 or 3 minutes, and he didn't say anything. And I'm like, are you going to say anything? You going to comment? And then he proceeded to tell me about his life, right? Because he immigrated to the country, back in 1950. And he just started to tell me about some of his experiences and the impact it's had on his life and his career and what he can and can't do. And it just, that was the first time he had ever shared that with me. And just that alone, I mean, what he had gone through in comparison to what I am currently speaking about, it's night and day, right? So has there been progress? Yes. Are we taking steps forward? Absolutely. I mean, the fact that we're on this call right now and you're asking me this type of question, I mean, I can tell you in my 25 years, as a player, as a coach, I've never been asked that question before. Right. So just the simple fact that we are now starting to have these conversations, we are now starting to pose these types of questions. Yeah, I 100% think it's progress, and every day is progress. But one of my colleagues at the university, we've done some great work at Carleton University. The introduction of different committees that speak to the BIPOC community, talk about equity and inclusivity. But not just Carleton, you're talking about universities across the country, right? Have all taken on this mantra now, where they're forming committees, both at the academic level and at the sporting level. But one of my colleagues at Carleton, also mentioned to me, it's great the work that we're doing, and she had also indicated to me is that, but we have to be very careful that we're not too quick to give ourselves a pat on the back, right? And I always remember those words, because for all the work that we're doing right now, I mean, I still think we have a long ways to go, right? And I have a young son. He's 8 years old now, and the way I see things is my job now is to try to influence as many people as I can to create a better environment and life for my kids and for the younger kids coming through, right? So I always, so having this conversation, I think is fantastic, right? And not everybody's gonna want to have it right away. Not everybody's going to be very transparent or very open about it, initially. But the key is just, you're trying to shift the culture, right? It's not just going to happen overnight. So I think you have to understand that, just we want to keep the momentum, right? You want to keep this topic top of mind. You want to be having these conversations around the dinner table, in the classroom, within your sports teams. I think it's very, very important that we continue to have this dialogue. And the only way I think we're going to, work towards a better, I think, just culture and society is just just communicating with each other. I don't think it's the problem of one race or one culture, right? I think it's a human problem. I think it's a problem for everybody. So we just need to continue to have that dialogue.
That was such an inspiring way to end our question section of our interview, and I really thank you for giving your perspective on such a relevant topic in our generation. So now, as we are approaching the end, we will move on to some rapid fire questions. Martin?
Okay.
So just obviously with the pandemic, a lot of time at home. What have you been watching on Netflix?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. I have to admit, I mean, I'm a little bit all over. I mean, anything that's sports related on Netflix, I've watched it all. So, The Last Dance, Michael Jordan, they have the Barcelona documentary, they have the Juventus documentary. I've watched all of those. But not sports related. Well, somewhat, Queen's Gambit has been massive for me. I've loved, I even go back and rewatch episodes. It's definitely increased my fondness of the game. I started playing it a lot more now. I also watched the Formula One. I thought that was an incredible documentary, just in terms of the preparation, the mentality of the athletes. What else? Oh, I watched a series called The 100, Or I'm not sure if anybody knows about that, but I just kind of fell in love with those series, and I just kind of jumped into those. But for me, I also watch anything that's like a docu-series, anything like that. I'm all over as well.
Next one, who is your favorite artist?
Oh, wow. I grew up in the hip hop generation. I mean, when it first started, so I can definitely say one of my favorite artists is Mos Def. I mean, I'm a big fan like Talib Kweli, the Roots band. That's just the music I grew up on, and I still listen to it to this day.
One of our panelists, Marcus, recommends watching The Travelers on Netflix.
All right, I like that. Thank you.
Martin, do you have another question?
Sure. So do you have a tattoo? And just explain it a little bit.
Okay. Yes, I do. I have one. It's on my back. It's an interesting story, and part of the reason why I don't have any others. So when I was in second year of university, I went back home, and I hadn't seen my friends in a while, and I think it was one of the Christmas holidays, I can't remember. And one of my friends calls me and says, "Hey, a bunch of us were gonna go and get our first tattoos." And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do this, And so it was like, I don't know, it was like eight of my friends, like close friends from high school. So they pick me up and we go. And I mean, how old am I at this time? 19, 20, I can't remember. But your youth, right? You make decisions and you kind of go back on them sometimes. But so we go and we end up at this at a person's house in the basement, right? So now we're all getting these tattoos on our and they all say the same thing, right? It's a symbol, and it was just a symbol, just represents the year that we were born, right? So that's what we have. And but it's just something for me. I'm very conscious of what I put on my body now. I mean, when you're a youth and you put something on your body at the age of 20, you got to have that until I'm 40 now. So it's a bit different, right? But it's on my back, so I don't necessarily get to see it all the time. My kids always remind me of it. So it's a fun thing. But yeah, I have one.
So in your free time, what's your favorite thing to do with your family?
Oh, good question. I mean, we just got into this, particularly during the pandemic. We got my youngest son, the Nintendo Switch. So we thoroughly enjoy playing Mario Kart together as a group. We're very big on like playing just games. So we play like Kids Monopoly. We'll play like Jenga together. We play Uno. Just any kind of fun games that we can play. And you have to understand, my daughter is 5 and my son is 8. So I mean, these games get really irrational at times in terms of the rules, and so it's a lot of fun. We really enjoy that time we get to spend.
Martin, did you want to ask a final question?
Sure. So obviously, as a player, it's big on diet, but now as a coach, it doesn't really matter. So what is your favorite snack?
Oh man, for me, I've always been a big fan of ice cream. Like I'm a huge vanilla ice cream fan. I mean, I remember my mom used to tell me stories when I was a kid. I used to eat like half the carton by myself, right? As an adult, I can't really do that anymore. It causes problems. However, I do enjoy a nice small bowl of ice cream, whenever I can. I try not to overdo it anymore. Right? But definitely vanilla ice cream. I know it sounds plain. I don't need any sprinkles. I don't need anything else. Just, Chapman's vanilla ice cream, and I'm good to go.
So thank you so much, Kwesi, for answering all these questions. You had some really great stories to share, and we hope you learned something from that.
Yeah, well,
sorry.
No, I was gonna say thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, so thanks again. Really appreciate it.
On behalf of the NCSSAA, we really appreciate you speaking with us today. Thank you again.
Thank you again.